Hi guys, Rachel here. How is everyone? So I'm going to talk about the books that I'm hoping to read for Gothic November and some of the decks that I'm thinking that I might use as companion pieces. So I know I sort of did like a semi-TBR in my introductory video for this year, which I tend to do, but I thought it would be fun to just talk about a few other things that I might read. Let me light some incense. I'm actually going to try this Scorpio incense from Omen in Salem, which is known as Hex now. I love Scorpio. So let me gather my thoughts here. All right, so I've already mentioned that I am working on Nathaniel Hawthorne's Tales, and this is a Norton Critical Edition. I've read a handful of the short stories in here already. I'm about to start The Celestial Railroad, and there's a bunch of essays and some of his letters and contemporary criticism in the back, like a lot, which is why I love these Norton Critical Editions. So we'll see if I get around to reading all of this for Gothic November. But I did read one of the essays yesterday, actually, after reading The Birthmark. I won't talk about that right now. But I am also currently reading, just started last night actually, The Scarlet Letter. This is one of those, like, is this Macmillan? Yeah, the Macmillan Collector's Library. I love these. I have like 3 of these. I have Wuthering Heights in this edition and Moby Dick, and they're so lightweight and the paper feels wonderful, gilded, and it's really portable. But if you're going to put it in your purse, I like to protect my books in like a little sleeve or a little pouch or something, you know? So I started reading this because my daughter is currently reading this for a book report. They told them they could choose any book they wanted, and her first choice was War and Peace. And I was like, well, you know, it's a bit long, and we already have a hard time trying to get homework done on time. So she went with this, and it's much shorter. However, it's not the easiest thing to read. But anyway, I had read this when I was 18 or 19, and I still remember how it struck me. I still have memories of sitting on my sunlit porch at the house I grew up in and being swept away by the beauty of this. It was just filled with color and light and love. And it was my first Nathaniel Hawthorne experience, and I wasn't expecting that. I was familiar with the story. I really loved the silent version with Lillian Gish and Lars Hansen. I just picked it up to read because it was in my house, and I thought it's an essential classic. I should probably read this. So right now I'm still in the introduction, Nathaniel Hawthorne's very lengthy introduction, which honestly was difficult for my daughter to read. And I totally hear her. She's like, what was that introduction all about? I'm not sure. She's like, I actually got to a point where I just kind of skipped to the first chapter. Is that okay? And I'm like, yes, that's totally okay. In fact, the edition I read years ago might not have even included it. But if you are a Nathaniel Hawthorne fan, reading the introduction is definitely worth it because it's like a little autobiography. It's called The Custom House. And it's really cool because he talks about all the men that he worked with in the Custom House. And I'm very familiar with the Custom House as it's right there in Salem, quite near the House of the Seven Gables, actually. And he talks about how his ancestors would probably be ashamed of his decision to become a writer. I love him. He was like so moody and emotional. Let me see if I can read some of this to you where he's talking about his ancestors here. So, the figure of that first ancestor, invested by family tradition with a dim and dusky grandeur, was present to my boyish imagination, as far back as I can remember. It still haunts me, and induces a sort of home feeling with the past, which I scarcely claim in reference to the present phase of the town. I seem to have a stronger claim to a residence here on account of this grave, bearded, sable-cloaked, and steeple-crowned progenitor, who came so early with his Bible and his sword, and trod the unworn street with such a stately port, and made so large a figure as a man of war and peace. A stronger claim than for myself, whose name is seldom heard and my face hardly known. He was a soldier, legislator, judge. He was a ruler in the church. He had all the puritanic traits, both good and evil. He was likewise a bitter persecutor, as witness the Quakers, who have remembered him in their histories, and relate an incident of his hard severity towards a woman of their sect, which will last longer, it is to be feared, than any record of his better deeds, although these were many. His son, too, inherited the persecuting spirit, and made himself so conspicuous in the martyrdom of the witches that their blood may fairly be said to have left a stain upon him. So deep a stain, indeed, that his old dry bones in the Charter Street burial ground must still retain it, if they have not crumbled utterly to dust. I know not whether these ancestors of mine bethought themselves to repent and ask pardon of heaven for their cruelties, or whether they are now groaning under the heavy consequences of them in another state of being. At all events, I, the present writer, as their representative, hereby take shame upon myself for their sakes, and pray that any curse incurred by them, as I have heard, and as the dreary and unprosperous condition of the race for many a long year back would argue to exist, may be now and henceforth removed. So it's sort of jarring to hear him talk about these men's better traits. It's kind of jarring for a modern reader to hear about somebody saying they had some better traits, they performed better deeds. But I suppose we also have to understand that maybe a lot of these actions, they were based on attitudes at the time, So I don't want to get into a whole history lesson, and I'm not trying to say by any means that they were good men, but they were doing what was expected of them. I have no idea what their better deeds could have been, but I did mention in my first Gothlit November video from this year that Nathaniel Hawthorne was very ashamed. He was very ashamed of the actions by his ancestors, and that is why he changed his name from Hathorne to Hawthorne. And you can actually visit the graves of his ancestors in the Charter Street Cemetery there in Salem. And yes, this is Nathaniel right here. I hope he's in the shot. We got this little portrait at the Peabody Essex Museum in Salem, and we call him Nathaniel Hawthorne. So when my sister was here, if you want a funny little aside, we just kind of had him like lying around on the table where we would eat, like at all times. And we would talk to him like he was part of our family. And then we sort of like set up this shrine where I put hot sauce by his portrait. This is one of my favorites, this habanero. And Mark was like, why is that? Because he's hot? And I'm like, yeah, he's Nathaniel Hawthorne. And then we made up this story about his past, how he was actually Nathaniel Hawthorne before he was Nathaniel Hawthorne, because he used to go to pubs and dance like somebody in a boy band, and no one liked it. So he decided that he was going to become a writer instead. And my sister said that he was her boyfriend. And then she broke up with him to start dating Ross Poldark. And it's really funny because whenever we're like at the Hawthorne Hotel, I will take pictures of his portrait on the wall and I'll be like, your boyfriend says hi. And it's just, I don't know. That's a little aside, but we've had loads of fun with that. And it was funny that one day we were there, the last time we were there, actually, we saw that whoever had been sitting at the table underneath his portrait, like had left a bottle of hot sauce there. So I took a picture. I'm like, look, someone else knows they're leaving an offering at his shrine. Okay, I hope that you guys didn't find that too rambly. Reading the Scarlet Letter, I'm sure that you know what this is about, but I'm sure I'll talk about this more in a wrap-up. I also wanted to briefly share with you this beautiful edition by Chatham River Press of the Scarlet Letter that I have. I might have another edition, I'm not sure, but we'll see if I can quickly find any of the little illustrations in here. Yeah, anyway, that's that. So, what else do we have for Nathaniel Hawthorne? I mentioned this beautiful antique copy I have of Twice Told Tales. So some of the tales in here I have read as part of the Norton Critical Edition. Some of these actually are not in that collection that I'm reading. But I also have this beautiful edition. You know I am a book collector. This is another copy of Twice Told Tales. I think this one is from the 60s. Isn't this beautiful? Isn't this gorgeous? I love this, like, I don't know, this like dark mustard color and this slate blue. It's so beautiful. Really nice, big copy, large print. This will be easy for me to read at night. I just read that. It was so good. The Minister's Black Veil. All right. I also have the Blithedale romance. I'm not sure if I'm going to read this, this month. But I think this was inspired by Hawthorne's time spent in this commune of sorts. And then, before becoming disenchanted with it, as often happens with new ideas that seem like good ideas. So this is a Broadview literary text, and I really like these editions too. I read their edition of Wuthering Heights and all of the essays and everything, and it was really insightful. Also for Nathaniel Hawthorne, I really do want to read this soon. This is a biography that I picked up secondhand in Salem by Brenda Wineapple. So I also have a book on, it's called The Peabody Sisters. It's about his wife, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I'm going to get around to all of that, but I should probably read this one soon. Now, moving on from Hawthorne, I mentioned I was thinking I might focus on American authors, and the reason for that is because I really want to have an excuse to read more Melville because I love Herman Melville. So I have here Pierre and the Ambiguities. I did show this in my Goth Lit video. This is another Norton Critical Editions, and I mean, I don't think that this is going to be very easy to read based off of what I've read of it. But let me read this. The back doesn't really tell you what it's about. Let me read this here that I printed off. Okay. Initially dismissed as a dead failure and a bad book, and declined by Melville's British publisher, Pierre has since struck critics as modern in its psychological probings and literary technique. Fit to be ranked with The Golden Bowl, Women in Love, and Ulysses. I loved Ulysses. Golden Bowl, I haven't read, but that's Henry James, and he's challenging. Anyway, none of Melville's other secondary works has so regularly been acknowledged by its most thorough critics as a work of genuine grandeur, however flawed. When Pierre Glendining's lifelong desire for a sister is seemingly realized on the eve of his marriage, his world is suddenly turned upside down, for he must choose between acknowledging his illegitimate half-sister or perpetuating his unsullied family legacy. Melville unfolds the story of an idealistic young man whose steadfast beliefs lead him to destroy his world and himself. Okay, and I've read some other criticism on this, and it sounds really weird, and I can't wait. So yeah, I'm hoping to get around to that for this year's challenge. Also, I would like to read Benito Sereno. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. I read Bartleby last month, or maybe in September, and that was actually quite gothic. I don't really want to give away any spoilers, but basically this dude is really unsettled by this other dude that he hired. And I'm just not going to give away anything else, but it says it's an intriguing moral allegory set in the business world of mid-19th century New York. A strange, enigmatic man employed as a clerk in a legal office. Bartleby forces his employer to come to grips with the most basic questions of human responsibility and haunts the latter's conscience. Yeah. Benito Cereno says it is considered one of Melville's best short stories, deals with a bloody slave revolt on a Spanish vessel. A splendid parable of man's struggle against the forces of evil, the carefully developed and mysteriously guarded plot builds to a dramatic climax while revealing the horror and depravity of which man is capable. So we'll see how gothic it is, but I'm saying, like, Bartleby definitely was. So I don't know why he's not more recognized as an author of Gothic literature. This hot sauce is in the way. But as I was saying in my other video, I wasn't the only one noticing, because there's this Gothic Melville book here that I just had to have. Now, if you're a Melville fan, I'm very sorry. This is pretty expensive. I bought this as a gift to myself. That's all I'm going to say. It's part of the Gothic literary studies. And we know often a lot of these books that maybe only students read, they're expensive. They're textbooks. But there are other books in this series which are more affordable. I had to have the Gothic Melville. Let's see. Herman Melville once took critics to task for missing the darkness 10 times black at the heart of Nathaniel Hawthorne's writing. Ironically, critics of Melville have largely steered clear of Melville's own darkness. The contributors to Gothic Melville reveal how Melville's writing is 100 times black in works that repeatedly raise questions about what the truth is, or if truth exists at all. This collection of scholarly essays makes up for the critical neglect of Melville's Gothicism by arguing that the Gothic is so extensively interwoven into the fabric of his writing that he must at last be recognized as among the genre's most important practitioners. Yeah. And I found this book because I simply Googled Gothic Melville and it came up. And I'm like, oh, that's cool, because I read another book, or maybe more than one, as part of this series. So I'm excited for that. And then if I want to stick with American authors, because I might just be in that mood after all this Hawthorne and Melville. And like as I've said, it's not always been my focus. It's very easy to pick up Poe. Poe was born in Boston. Nathaniel Hawthorne was born in Salem. So his works are categorized as Southern Gothic. So we might get into that in another video. I can't make this video too long. We're already 20 minutes in, and I've already mentioned the storage issues on my phone. But anyway, Southern Gothic does not necessarily mean that it is set in the South. It's a very psychological sort of thing. So I could read Ghost by Edith Wharton. She was born in New York, I think. But what's really cool is I'm sort of just starting to realize that I live in a region that is very rich in literary culture, literary history. Like, we have Nathaniel Hawthorne. Even Herman Melville wrote much of Moby Dick in the Berkshires. And I really want to go see the Melville house. I was there last summer, but I didn't have time to stop in because I was there to go to Tanglewood to see a concert. But Edith Wharton, the Edith Wharton house is in Lenox, Massachusetts, which is right there near Tanglewood. Sorry that I just whistled. But I love Edith Wharton. I will mention very quickly as an aside, Mad Woman in the Attic. I really thought maybe this year I would just finish it up. That's why I read Middlemarch last month, because I didn't want spoilers for Middlemarch. I've put this aside so many times to read other books like Villette and Shirley that I hadn't read yet. But I don't know. I might not actually read this or finish it up as part of my challenge for November, even though it extends into December, because I don't know if this is where my mind is going to be. I might decide to just focus on American authors for a change. So, to continue on in that vein, we have Julia and the Illuminated Baron. I've mentioned this a couple of times. This is important because this was written by Sally Saward Wood, and she's considered the first American woman writer of Gothic fiction. And she's from Maine. She was born in York, Maine, which I am also very familiar with. It's not that far away. I used to go to the beach there all the time. Very cool. I don't think, let's see, does it tell you what it's about? Originally published in 1800, this romantic tale of intrigue tells the story of a young woman of unknown origin and impeccable virtue. In her search for self-identity, Julia undergoes a series of dangerous encounters, including imprisonment in a gloomy castle at the hands of the Baron, a member of the secret society known as the Illuminati. And it's set against the backdrop of the French Revolution. It sounds very Gothic, very like European, and like Castle of Otranto and all of that. I mean, it was published in 1800. So we'll see. We'll see. If I want to stick to American authors, this would be an obvious choice. For some contemporary, I consider it contemporary. I'm sorry, guys. It is technically classified as contemporary, and I do view a lot of these works as contemporary. I don't read very much that is like contemporary within our times. We have Shirley Jackson, The Haunting of Hill House. I'm sure you all know this. I actually haven't read this one. I've read a couple of her other works and absolutely loved them, but I haven't actually read this novel. Shirley Jackson, another American. And then we have James Welch, Winter in the Blood. Very excited for this. I think I probably will get around to reading this. Another American. He was a Native American novelist and a poet, and he is considered one of the founding authors of Native American Renaissance, which I didn't even know was like a genre or a movement. Very cool. Winter in the Blood. Let's see. Narrated by a young Native American living on the Fort Belknap Reservation in Montana, Winter in the Blood is the unforgettable story of a man living out the tragedy of his people. Intelligent, sensitive, and self-destructive, he is haunted by the untimely deaths of his father and older brother and the shards of his once proud heritage. He sleepwalks through the days working on his stepfather's cattle ranch and consoles himself with alcohol and women. An ironic epiphany provides a tie to the vast land of his ancestors and an alternative to despair. So again, another one that doesn't stand out like, glaringly as Gothic. It did come up in my research. So that sounds like a good one to read. And then there is Raintree County, of course, which I have mentioned. And I will read this book description that I printed out here for you. All right. Performed by a narrator who seems to understand the book perfectly, throughout a single day in 1892, John Shaughnessy recalls the great moments of his life, from the love affairs of his youth in Indiana, to the battles of the Civil War, to the politics of the Gilded Age, to his homecoming as school teacher, husband, and father. Shaughnessy is the epitome of the place and period in which he lives, a rural land of spring-like women and shady gamblers, wandering vagabonds and soapbox orators. Yet here on the banks of the Shamokin River, which weaves its primitive course through Raintree County, Indiana, he also feels and obeys ancient rhythms. A #1 bestseller when it was first published in 1948, this powerful novel is a compelling vision of 19th century America with timeless resonance today. Doesn't sound Gothic at all, does it? No. But there's truly many Southern Gothic elements in it, primarily stemming from this one particular character who was played by Elizabeth Taylor in the film. And as I mentioned in my previous video, even my daughter pointed it out. She's like, is this Gothic? I think this is Gothic. So we'll see. I have not read the book. Really loved the movie. I'm not going to talk any more about it right now because I am running out of time, as usual. I'm sorry, I always intend to talk less. I want to mention the decks that I would like to use for Gothic November this year. So, of course, I have mentioned the American Renaissance Tarot more than once, and I have a walkthrough of this. And the reason that I want to use it is because there are so many scenes from Herman Melville's novels, especially Moby Dick, and Nathaniel Hawthorne's works. And then, of course, there is Poe. There's plenty of Poe in here as well. I mean, there are plenty of cards in here which wouldn't really be categorized as Gothic. But you have a lot of Frederick Douglass in here and stuff. And I mean, you know, those were dark times, you know. So I am really excited to work with this. One of the reasons being the book. I read snippets of this during my first impressions walkthrough, and I was thrilled and astounded. So, for example, I can read, well, we'll get into the minors. I can read like a Nathaniel Hawthorne story and then read about it in this book if it's covered. Like we have the Marble Fawn. I didn't pick up the Marble Fawn for this year's challenge. I think that's a novel that takes place in Europe. Or I could read a story by Poe, or like Here's the Scarlet Letter. And we can read up on it. Like, look at all the information that you have here. And the keywords, all these wonderful keywords they have. Guilt, sin, regret, remorse, morbid sense of shame, evidence of wrongdoing, arrest, exposure. See, I mentioned all of that about Nathaniel Hawthorne in my other video. Moby Dick. Oh my gosh, I love this card. But I'm really, really excited for this. Even though I know like not all of the cards are like going to really give me those Gothic feels, I really, really want to work with it. Another one that I mentioned in my last video as well is the Haunts Oracle by Stacey Williams Inc. Because, yeah, that's another obvious one. And I did buy the trilogy, but I'm just going to show you the Haunts for right now. So, yeah, one of the reasons I bought the trilogy is because I was thinking about Gothic November coming up, and I thought this would be fun to use. This would be fun to use, especially if I read Raintree County, you know. Love that. The Devil's Chair. This is so cool. So cool. So excited. I have not started working with this yet. I haven't had it too long, and my deck choices have been, I don't know, very conscientious, I guess. I don't know if I said that right. I didn't get a lot of sleep last night. Oh well. And then another one by the same artist is the Roses, Dust, and Ashes Oracle. Now, my friend Kaluna V, in her latest video, recently talked about this. I haven't used this yet. I bought this very recently. I love these backs, but you know my love of cemeteries. And she was explaining the book can be used as like this little pocket guidebook that you can bring along with you to cemeteries. And there's like this little key, I guess, that explains a lot of the symbology on the headstones, that explains, you know, what the meanings are and things to look out for. And I didn't even know that because I got the deck, admired the cards, and didn't really look at the guidebook beyond like that. So I'm so thrilled. I'm so thrilled. I really loved Kaluna's latest video. But I love the like the gold details around the borders. It's really, really, it's really something. And I love it's like all black and white. So very excited for that. And of course, while we are on that topic, I will probably continue to use graven images. As many of you probably know, This is one of my all-time favorites. And the book is also wonderful. We went to the nearby cemetery on Saturday, actually, day after Halloween, because we did Halloween Part 2. And, oh, it was so beautiful. It sits on a lake. And some of the earliest examples of New England stone carving are there in that cemetery. Like, there's this one headstone I enjoy visiting because the dude was like in his 90s when he died, and he was born in the 1500s, which is just really cool for the United States. You know, for Western culture, that's really old. That's really old for us. So yeah, it was a wonderful Halloween Part 1 and 2. Of course, I will most likely use my Gothic Literature Tarot by Syrian Shadow. I have a walkthrough of this too from last year. I don't remember if it was any good or not. I mean, Nathaniel Hawthorne is in this deck. I think that there is a scene from House of the Seven Gables. So many of these I've read. It's just a beautiful deck. It feels wonderful. Oh, Kathy and Heathcliff. Yeah, I'm trying really hard not to read Wuthering Heights again. It's always a temptation. And I don't know, like, I might veer off. I might not stick. I might not stay in America. I might wander back off to Europe or somewhere else in the world. But I just thought it might make sense because, like I said, it's really interesting. I feel very blessed to live so near so many of these historical sites, which are tied to Hawthorne and Melville and Edith Wharton. It's really neat. Of course, there's the Bohemian Gothic Tarot, which is a deck that I'm already currently using. So I am probably going to continue. This is the 3rd edition. And I'm really loving it. And I might bring out the 4th edition to use again as I'm getting more acquainted with this. But yeah, this is just easier for me to see. You know, you've got a lot of supernatural things going on here, which many of these works that I have chosen for this year, most of them don't really have many supernatural elements going on. Maybe they're alluded to, but they are just, you know, they remain elusive. I don't know as any, like, vampires will make their way into my reading this year, you know, or monsters. Like last year, I reread Frankenstein. Loved that. Were there any other decks before I go on too much and run out of time? Yeah, actually. Yeah, there is. So I might want to get going here. Another one that I really want to start using, but again, it's not, of course, not specific to the United States or anything, is the Crooked Way Gothic Tarot. I got this recently because of Gigi. But this is so cool. So cool. Maybe not for the faint of heart because it's gorier than some of the other Gothic tarots are out there. But it's so much fun, and there's a lot of humor in it. Yeah, I'm probably going to have to use this, even though I'm worried it might make me want to get back into Byron or the Shelleys because they're in here. I shouldn't say worried. It's just I have some lofty goals. Now, all the books that I showed you, oh look, Queen Victoria, and she's all like goth. That's so cool. I love it. Oh my God. Yeah, there's Mary Shelley. Anyway, I'm probably not going to read everything that I showed you, but those are all things that I've added to my list, and we will see what I have time for. But anyway, isn't this fun? Isn't this fun? Oh, there's Percy Shelley. Eleanor and I had fun last year reading his bio, and it was so cute. I told her, I was like, hey, I'm thinking like doesn't he remind you of Morrison? And she was like, Jim Morrison. She's like, oh my God. She's like, my mind is actually blown. She's like, wait a minute. She's like, Jim Morrison is literally Percy Shelley reincarnated, right? So much fun. Anyway, if you're still here, thank you for sticking with me and Nathaniel Hawthorne. And I look forward to hearing about what you guys are reading. Maybe let me know down below in the comments. And there's so many choices out there. So many, even more than I had realized, like my first run of Goth Lit November. So I hope I remembered to talk about all of my choices. Anyway, this should be fun, guys. All right. Can't wait to hear about what you're reading and watching and all that jazz. All right. See you soon. Bye.